this is something, the subject is kind of close to my heart because I come from Maharashtra, and the Marathas were, if a lot of people don't know here, they were a kind of a resurgent political power that dominated the political scene all over Indian subcontinent from roughly late 17th down to about early 19th century. So they had a sort of 150 years of political domination of the subcontinent. It would be interesting to see how this whole period of 150 years, how it can be divided into various suitable bite-sized portions when it comes to Maratha history. The coinage kind of responds to these periods. So there is an earlier period that sort of dates between 1630 to 1708, which I call as Swarajya period. Swarajya is a Sanskrit word, literally means our own rule. So it's a kind of self-rule period. And this matches with the career of a very illustrious king in medieval India, very famously known as Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, who was born in 1630 and died in 1680. And he was the sort of progenitor of this period in which he established his own kingdom. And also in 1674, very famously crowned himself. And this was a major shift from the political functioning around this time, because there was no indigenous king who had crowned himself until then. And there was and this was a kind of a planned spectacle where people were invited, a whole protocol was created, a text was created specifically to sort of, connect it to the Hindu religious order in a way. So it was a major shift in the political scenario there. And obviously, this attracted the attention of the Mughals, who were claiming the same status of being sovereign, and that sort of brought them into loggerheads with each other. And then after Shivaji's death in 1680, the Mughals tried for about 25 years to vanquish or quell this sort of emergent power, but they were unfortunately unsuccessful. Aurangzeb dies in 1707 at a very old age of around 85, and he laments at the end of life that he hasn't been able to fulfill his destiny, as it were, and now the days of the Mughal Empire are numbered, as it were, because they have these people sort of acting against them. But then it sort of led into its own set of politics for the Marathas. And between 1708 to 1735 is what I would regard as the foundational period for their sort of expansionist activities, which then kick off. And from 1735 to 1761 is the kind of period of growth and apogee. And the apogee comes in about 1758-59, when the Marathas actually reach all the way to Peshawar and cross the river Indus. And this is again much like Shivaji Maharaj's coronation, another kind of political milestone in the Maratha history, that they crossed the river Indus and went beyond Attock, which was the traditional boundary of India. So they were technically they went outside India in their sort of expansion. And then in 1761, they had a major setback because all these activities attracted attentions from other North Indian political authorities, plus the king of Afghanistan, who was claiming that area for himself, and that was Ahmad Shah Durrani. And he came down, and then there was this famous Third Battle of Panipat on 14th of January, 1761, in which the Marathas were defeated. And that was a major setback for their career. So from there was a period of what I call as challenges and responses, both from within different polities of Northern India and Southern India, but also within the Marathas as well. And that sort of runs till about 1761 to 1777. In 1777, the Marathas, the head of the Maratha Confederacy, nominally the descendants of Shivaji, they are the Chhatrapatis, but the prime minister of the Chhatrapatis who's called the Peshwa, then sort of becomes the major center of power. And in 1777, around that time, they have a baby Peshwa who is then sort of resurrected, put in the office by a council of ministers, and these council of ministers then hold that state together in the name of this baby prime minister. And then follows a second period of ascendancy, which is a period which is marked by cooperation and also some sort of conflagration between these constituent elements of the polity, who were ministers, barons, military fiefholders, and they all sort of come together and they have their own dynamic. But between that, between 1777 and 1802, it sort of is the second period in which the Marathas are on the ascendant again, control a lot of North India in this respect. In 1802, another milestone happens, and that is a treaty that the then office holder of the prime minister signs with the British, and that practically strips off any sovereignty. He's still around. He has certain degree of rule, but his major elements in his power are stripped, and that is the Treaty of Bassein or Vasai, which is to the north of Bombay. And that is again a kind of, that marks a period of decline. So from there onwards to 1818, when the British finally take over the entire Maratha state and send the Peshwa, the prime minister, off to North India in a political retirement, as it were. And there he lives until about 1851. So it lives, after his retirement, he lives quite long. But that doesn't sort of end the Maratha impact on the politics. And there is a period in which the British supremacy and the remnants of the Maratha power keep on doing things with each other until the Great Revolt of 1857. So that is the kind of timeline that we're looking at, 1640 to 1857, roughly. So this is the Maratha history picture in a small nutshell. When it comes to coins, of course, Shivaji Maharaj being the sort of fount of sovereignty in terms of Maratha history, he does do many interesting things in his short political career. And of course, the coins are not exempt. He introduces a coinage which is entirely written in Devanagari script, which is an interesting shift because all the coins at this time are Arabic and Farsi, and be it Mughal coins or be it the coins of the Deccan Sultans, they're all inscribed in Farsi and Arabic. As against that, he shifts that design pattern and issues coins with inscriptions in Nagari. And again, another interesting thing is that he also, the coins are quite simple in designs. They don't have any grandiose titles. At his coronation, he was declared to be with a kind of ancient title called Chhatrapati, which means Lord of the Umbrella. This is the Lord of the Royal Umbrella, obviously. And that's what sort of comes on coins. And his coinage is interesting because he also very sagaciously introduces a gold coinage. The gold coins that he struck are actually lower in weight than the traditional Hone standard. The traditional Hone standard was 3.5 grams, whereas the coins that Shivaji struck were to a standard of 2.8 grams. Now that is quite interesting because that actually matches them with the standard of a quarter mohur. So the North Indian mohur or Ashrafi and rupee systems that were being sort of dominating the currency scene at this time, he tried to fit his coins into it with sort of a interesting backdoor entry. He did strike his coins in the southern system, but they were denominated in such weights that they could fit in the northern system as well. So this was quite an interesting thing. Same thing happens with some silver coins that are known for in his name. The silver denominations also fit in this kind of, have a sort of dual denominational role. The copper coins are struck to, again, a standard sort of Deccan denomination, and we know of full units, half units, and quarter units struck in that period. There is a controversy about when exactly Shivaji started striking his coins, because he was called Chhatrapati, the Lord of the Royal Umbrella, at the coronation. One would presume that these coins are post-coronation issues. However, there is a sort of a reference from a later Mughal chronicle that attributes him to have struck coins as early as 10 years before his coronation. So this is a space to watch. Recently, there was an article in the Numismatic Digest about Dutch correspondence involving import and export of copper and sale of copper to Shivaji, and in that it is mentioned that he's striking coins with our copper, and they actually give a description of the coins, and the description is interesting because that description is slightly different than what you see here, and on the copper coins that are shown here, the inscription is Shri Raja Shiva on obverse and Chhatrapati on the reverse, whereas the Dutch reference says that the coins that he is striking have the inscription Shiva Raja on obverse and Chhatrapati on the reverse. But what is quite interesting is that this particular letter is dated about 3.5 months before the event of coronation. So there is a chance, there's quite a good chance that he must have been calling himself Chhatrapati even before the coronation. So this opens up a fairly long and protracted debate in Maratha history about the nature, the meaning, the adoption of the title of Chhatrapati by these kings. So it's just an aside. Shivaji Maharaj dies in 1680, and then is succeeded by his son Sambhaji or Shambhu. And he carries on striking coins in the same fashion as his father. And you can see that there is a clear typological connection between these coins that are of in the name of Sambhaji with the father. Except that there are a couple of anomalous sort of issues where the obverse legend arrangement is presented differently. So the first coin here on the top left says Shri Raja Shambhu in 3 lines. The one next to it says Shri Raja Sham and Bhu in the 3rd line. So it's the letters are arranged very differently. And the last one actually has a 2-line legend instead of 3 lines. Shri Raja in 1 line and Shambhu in 1 line. Why did these changes happen? We don't know really. Probably because it's possible that these issues were sort of emergency issues to pay troops or something like that, because his career, only 9 years of rule, but it was all riddled with a lot of political battles and campaigns and marches against the Siddhis of Janjira, the Portuguese, the Mughals. It was a period of great political turmoil. So it's possible that some of these issues were kind of, made into a quick, fast way to make payments. But anyway, the short of the long is that we have these coins which are slightly different than in the legend arrangement sense than the first type that was started by his father. He was captured in 1689 and killed quite gruesomely by the Mughals. And at that time, his wife, the queen, whose name was Yesubai, and his elder son, Shahu, whose name was also Shivaji, but he was called Shahu. They were at his capital in Raigad. And after his capture and death, the Mughals then besieged Raigad. And this was a real point of emergency for the Marathas, because this is like, live or die kind of moment for the kingdom. And at that time, Shivaji's other son, that is the half brother of Sambhaji, whose name was Rajaram, consults the queen, and the queen advises him that you should run away. leave us to our own fate. We'll take care of ourselves. You run away. You go to the southern part of the kingdom, which is in Tamil Nadu. And this is again something that Shivaji had inherited from his father, as his father's Jagir fief, as a part of his father's fief. He had inherited this kingdom in Tamil Nadu. So Rajaram is advised to actually, escape from Raigad and go to Tamil Nadu and set up the court there. So he does that. He escapes from Raigad, which is kind of almost near Bombay, and goes all the way down to Tamil Nadu, sets up his court there. And at that time, he actually also crowns himself. So but in the intervening period, he's just a caretaker, a regent. But when he gets there, because by that time, the Mughals then capture the original Maratha capital, Raigad, and take both the queen and the young prince as prisoners. So in that case, to avoid the whole kingdom being kingless, then this second half son of Shivaji crowns himself. And then there he strikes coins, which are again pretty much, the larger copper coins are pretty much in the same sort of type as what we saw for the previous rulers. There are 3 lines inscription in Nagari, Shri Raja Ram, and then on the reverse Chhatrapati. But because the kingdom now is kind of anchored in Tamil Nadu, he also strikes coins in the South Indian fashion of cash and fanams. So the gold fanam here that you see here is a unique specimen in the British Museum collection, and it has quite clearly the inscription on the obverse can be restored as Raja Ram Chhatrapati. And on the reverse, it's not very clear what the reverse says, but probably starts with the word Jarab written in Nagari, which is probably the sort of Nagari transliteration of the word Zarb, and it probably has the mint name following. It's possible. The coin on the lower right side is a Rajaram issue of a much lighter copper weight, and that was kind of the weight standard that was prevalent in Tamil Nadu. So Rajaram has coins in 2 types, 2 sort of currency systems. One is the South Indian cash and fanam and system, and then also some very few rare specimens in the north sort of Maharashtra style of the coins as well. What happens after Rajaram is that he survives for about 9 or 10 years in the southern part of the kingdom, and the Mughals get there as well, and there is again a political tussle, and then they besiege him in his southern stronghold, which is the fortress of Jinji. And the siege goes on and on and on for a long time. In the meantime, Aurangzeb is getting old, and his officials are sort of anticipating that he will die one of these days. And therefore, a whole set of different politics then sets out. And again, in 17, after the Mughals besiege the fortress of Jinji for a long time, then they again allow Rajaram to escape from that fortress and then come back to Maharashtra, so that they could actually take hold of that fortress. That sort of becomes more important for them rather than actually capturing the king. And that's what happens. He is allowed to escape. He comes back to Maharashtra, but he doesn't survive long. And then for this, he dies in about 1700, and then between 1700 and the eventual death of Aurangzeb, 1707, the Marathas carry on their fight against the Mughals under the leadership of Rajaram's widow, who was Tarabai. In 1708, when Aurangzeb dies in 1707. So in 1708, the captive prince and the queen, which are in Mughal captivity in the Mughal camp, the successors of Aurangzeb think that we are going to get into a succession battle here. So we don't want all this, things hanging around, this baggage hanging around with us. And the person who's in charge is Aurangzeb's second son, Azam Shah, and he says he thinks it's quite all right to actually let them go, because they will fight amongst themselves, and I will not have to deal with this. I can deal with my own succession battles. So then he lets the captive Shahu out, and then Shahu comes and obviously starts squabbling with Tarabai. So that then involves a period of consolidation. And this is where something interesting happens in a sort of numismatic sense, because it is actually Tarabai and Shahu who then look towards the Mughals for legitimacy, to actually decide who is the right claimant amongst them. And in that particular period, Tarabai starts striking coins in the name of the Mughal emperor. And the first coins in the name of the Mughal emperor that Tarabai strikes are in the name of Farrukhsiyar, who starts ruling in 1712 and carries on till about 1718, 1719. And around 1714, 1715, Shahu is kind of entrenched in Maharashtra and has his politically, he's a stronger faction because he manages to bring together a lot of local Maratha powerful people on his side. So Tarabai at this point is probably the weaker faction, and then she resorts to striking these coins. So that actually changes the nature of Maratha coins quite drastically. But at the same time, it also brings them into a typology that was followed all across India. Until then, Maratha coins were largely in Devanagari script and in the name of the Chhatrapati. Here onwards, they start getting issued in the name of the Mughal emperors. And then eventually, in 1719, Shahu sends his first prime minister, Balaji Vishwanath, to Delhi and gets a sanction from the Mughals to collect revenues for the 6 Mughal provinces of the Deccan. And so the Mughals then actually play a role in legitimizing the Maratha kingdom, as it were. And then for hence onwards, all the coins of the Marathas, most of the coins of the Marathas, if not all, are struck in the name of the Mughal emperor. So these are the earliest ones, and they are very rare, and the mints are really obscure. There is the first mint, Kila Shahnabi Durg Urf Parnala. Parnala or Panhala is next to Kolhapur in South Maharashtra, and it was the capital of Tarabai in his time. But also other places like Malwan, which is a harbor on the western coast, and Bhudargarh, which is again a fairly strong fortress to the south of Kolhapur. These were sort of outposts of Tarabai's power, and that's where these coins are struck from. That particular feature of striking coins in the names of the Mughal emperor then catches up and goes on. So we have early Maratha coins who are pretty much look like Mughal coins. They don't have any much of a difference, except that the calligraphy and the style of inscriptions is rather poor. And one has to attribute these coins to the Marathas on the basis of the fact that the mints at which they were struck were under Maratha control at this time. So from here onwards, also what happens is that the currents of Maratha history, the factual aspects of Maratha history, then sort of get connected closely with the numismatics of Marathas. And you can see that there are 4 coins shown here: Muhiabad Urf Pune, Talegaon, which is quite close to Pune, Satara, which is the capital of the Chhatrapatis, of Shahu particularly, and Kolhapur, again, the capital of the Tarabai faction. So they are all stuck in the name of Muhammad Shah, the Mughal emperor. And as you can see, the coin of Talegaon is actually a copy of the Muhammad Shah's rupees of Surat Mint. So they actually imitate these sort of popular coins in the region. Everything else remains the same, except the mint name is inscribed differently. So they sort of imitate these things as well. And these are sort of early Maratha issues, mainly in the period of 1708 to 1735, when, apart from the fact that calligraphically they're of a slightly poorer standard, and the fact that the places which were striking these coins are under Maratha control, there is not much else to say that these are Maratha issues. However, that changes again as the Maratha power sort of goes expanding in sort of roughly after 1735 onwards. The Maratha coins acquire an important characteristics, and that is the inclusion of symbols on them. And these symbols are drawn from a kind of socio-religious repertoire that the Marathas are familiar with, and everybody in Western India would be familiar with. And a lot of these are kind of religious symbols. So, for example, you have the Shaivite symbols such as a Shivalinga, or the three-pronged bael leaf, which is kind of one of Shiva's offerings. On the coin of Ahmedabad that you see on top right here, there is an Ankush, which is an implement in the hand of Lord Ganesha. So again, like connected with one of the attributes of Ganesha. And one might assume that these are kind of embellishments, but they are not, because there is evidence available to us to suggest that they function different roles. They function the role, or they perform different roles. They perform as indicators of political sovereignty. They perform as indicators of mints, where the mints were located. They also perform as indicators of people who were actually concerned with the issue of the coin, either mint officials or somebody who had the mint license. So the choice and the deployment of these symbols has many layers of meaning. It's not just a straightforward embellishment or a religious statement or something like that. So, for example, we know that in Ahmedabad, particularly, in a particular period after Ahmedabad was occupied by the Marathas, it reverted back to the Mughals for a year and a half. And in that period, the Mughal authorities carefully stripped the elephant gourd, the Ankush symbol, from the coins, and then they substituted it with flour. And when the Marathas regained the city after 1.5 years, they reinstate the symbol. So there is a political message in these symbols, but there are other messages as well. So one has to sort of bear that in mind. Sorry, not moving forward. Yeah, sure. So what is and then when the Maratha power starts sort of expanding, I've segregated the Maratha presence in central India, in Malwa and Bundelkhand, in a sort of slightly separately, because we have evidence from research of other historians like Stuart Gordon that the ways the Marathas interacted with this part of the subcontinent was slightly different than their interaction with other parts of the subcontinent. And they actually tried, or at least it happened, that this part was then integrated much more closely into Maratha political strategy, fiscal policy, everything. Elsewhere in the North India, the Marathas were more like controlling the local kingdoms as client states, really, as on behalf of the Mughal emperor. But in Malwa particularly, they appointed revenue administrators with tenures that were longer than usual. So there was a distinct interest in amongst the Marathas to actually integrate Malwa and Bundelkhand, parts of central India, into the Maratha polity much more closely. And we have evidence that this expansion and this integration into general administration of the Maratha apparatus, as it were, went hand in hand with establishing mints as well, and various portions of this country were sort of given to Maratha sardars or statesmen or barons. So we have the Scindias, the Holkars, and the Pawars apportioning Malwa between 1735 and 1739, and then sort of carrying on their own political careers from that period. Some part of Malwa was under direct control of the Peshwa. So there is a distinct connection between the fiscal administration that the Marathas were trying to impose in this period, in this part, and the administration and the opening of mints here. So that is something which is slightly different than other cases. So there were various characters here. So for example, Jayappa Scindia, who was the progenitor of the Scindia house of Gwalior, and some more famous, like the Scindias, then sort of emerge into a major political power in North India, and then subsequently also Gwalior, the princely state of Gwalior. But there were other characters or other players as well in the field, such as Naru Shankar or Balaji Govind Kher, who are not that famous, but they still controlled various parts of this terrain in their own rights, and they administered their own mints in those parts as well. The apogee, as I said, comes in the late 1750s, and here we have Marathas actually going in what is present-day Pakistan, and issuing coins again at these places. They are pretty much in the same typology as the Mughal coins preceding them were, but the very fact that they are issued in the name of the Mughals here attributes them to the Marathas, because the Mughals had no presence there really in just for the names, apart from the name's sake. And this part, because it was being contested between the king of Afghanistan, Ahmad Shah Durrani, and the Marathas on behalf of the Mughals, if there were coins struck in the name of Mughals, they would be Maratha issues. Because otherwise there would be the issues in the name of Ahmad Shah Durrani. So there's a whole range of back and forth political tussles that happen in this part. And in some cases, the Marathas do leave a kind of numismatic imprint. So for example, on the coins of Lahore that you see on top left here, there is a Maratha symbol that is included on the reverse, which is the Maratha pennant, the triangular pennant. And that is a very clear symbol of Maratha affinity, as it were. So they do actually add their own marks in some ways as well. As I said, in 1761, this whole enterprise then has a major setback, and then we enter a different area of a different epoch of Maratha power and politics. A little bit of a discussion is pertinent here on the nature of Maratha minting. There are papers available to suggest that minting in Maratha period was happening both ways. The mints were government run as well as privately handled. And although the authority to run a mint was vested in the office of the Peshwa, or indeed whoever was a local in charge, then they were given farming rights, like for 2 or 3 years, a license would be issued to run a mint. But the government-run mints were paid. The staff in the government-run mint was paid from the government coffers, as it were, whereas the privately farmed mints, the staff and the person who was running it would make an advance to the government, get a license, and then try to earn profit over that license. So that was the way it functioned. From archival sources, we know names. So, for example, we know that Nasik and Dharwad, there were attempts, or at least we have charters which were given to individuals named Lakshman Appaji at Nasik and Pandurang Murar at Dharwad, who were authorized by the government to run the mints there as a kind of government enterprise. But there were other people. So, for example, this chap, Dullabh Seth Govindji, that you find, he's worthy of further numismatic research, because he kind of emerges in the late 18th century as a money and entrepreneur. He runs mints, that is his business. He applies for licenses, takes them on license, and farms the mints, and that is his main profession. And he's known to have run the mint in Pune, in Nasik, in Mullair, and in Konkan, in a place called Nagotna, which is kind of near Mumbai as well. So he runs these mints, and that is what his profession is. I'm trying to find more information about the career of this particular person, because he's quite an interesting chap when it comes to the backdrop of how this mintage was managed. And also there were individuals like the Dev family, who was running a mint at Chinchwad. Now this is a unique family, because it had authority as money lenders, as important elite, and also as hereditary incarnations of a 16th century saint. So the head of the family was treated as an incarnation of a predecessor. And of course, that gave them a lot of social capital. And this is again something which is very interesting, is that these people who are dealing with money, who are farming money, and who are issuing money, are into the money business, as it were, also have social capital that they have accrued from other sources. They have these, a religious backdrop, or a tenurial backdrop of something. They have major landholders or something like that. So they have a fair degree of social clout, upon which then they apply for these mints. And some of these characters also then become sardars, or barons of the court. And the Chhatrapatis of Satara and Kolhapur had their own barons. And of course, they had their own fiefs. So in those fiefs, they started issuing their own coins. So we have examples from Angre family, the Konkan, in Konkan, who were the hereditary admirals of the Maratha Navy. They operated mint at Rajapur. The Savant Bhosles in South Konkan, who were again kind of a local polity, local rulers. They eventually ended up ruling the princely state of Savantwadi. They had their own mint. And also, this is a small family of Sardars of the Chhatrapatis of Kolhapur, whose family name was Scindias, but they also had a title, Sena Khaskel. So they were called Sena Khaskel Sindes, and their base was at this place called Torugal, in which is now in northern Karnataka. So these are examples of baronial coinages under the Marathas. And similar baronial coinage was also struck by the Sardars of the Peshwas. And you have, again, different families. So, for example, you have Gangadharao Patwardhan, who was from a family, a very eminent Brahmin family, and a very, very close supporters of the Peshwas right from the word go. And they had fiefs all across central, western Maharashtra and northern Karnataka. And they actually mentioned the name of the Peshwa, or the prime minister, as Shri Pant Pradhan on their coins. So that is how much their loyalty to the Peshwas stretches, to actually mentioned by the name. And a lot of these families are, of course, Brahmins. They are sort of Peshwa's kinsmen, as it were. And Malhar Bhikaji Raste, who again is much like Govind Seth Dulabji, is a major character. He ran 4 or 5 mints, but in his own fiefs. And this is an example of his coin struck at the mint of Atani. And you can see that on the obverse, at the sort of 1 o'clock position, there is a Devanagari letter Ra that stands for the initial of his family. So it's so they leave their own marks on these coins in these kind of fashions as well. And this was not, again, it was not confined to Maharashtra alone. Outside Maharashtra, some Sardars created their fiefs, and then subsequently princely states that emerged out of these fiefs. So, for example, Govind Pant Bundele, the Bundele family was very much prominent in central India. And this is an example of a rupee that he struck at Itawa, which is in Uttar Pradesh. But the successors of this family were very much active in the regions around Sagar, Damoh, and Jalon, which is all in central India. This is also the period in which we see an inception of what later becomes a category in its own right, and that is the princely state, sort of princely state coinage. And the roots of these princely state coinage in this period are again embedded within how the particular places in which these coins were issued, what sort of relationship the ruling families had with those places. So, for example, we know that the Holkar family ran a mint in Indore, but Indore was a personal fief of the Holkar family. Nothing of the revenue that came out of Indore went to the Peshwas. So although the Holkars were kind of, they started as sardars or barons of the Peshwa court, they had some part of their territories were held entirely for privately for their own, for their own offices, as it were. Whereas from other parts, they carried on giving Peshwa a cut in the tribute that they were collecting. So these are the places where Indore, Gwalior, Baroda are the three places where three eminent families established and then subsequently became very major princely states in 19th and 20th century. But the roots of their coining activity are in this period, and there they strike coins as more or less not independent exactly, but more or less they're individual rulers. And their sort of is the beginning of princely state coinage. And again, here we have symbols, the sun face on the Holkar coin, the sword on the Gwalior coin, and on the Baroda coin at the bottom, there is the initial Farsi initial Go, which is right next to the Regnalier on the reverse. And that Go stands for the initial of the ruler Govindra. In the period when the Marathas then become plenipotentiaries of the Mughal emperor in 1780s, these are this period is dominated by the activities of the Scindia, and then in this period also they operate different mints, and they are operated through local Maratha governors that were appointed. And here again, they have kind of, left marks on them. So for example, this gold mohar of Saharanpur that you see here on top right has the Farsi initial of the governor, whose name was Lakhbada Lad. L in Farsi, Lam in Farsi is actually acts as a kind of a distinguishing symbol there. And similarly, down at the bottom, this is a rupee of Mathura, which was struck under the tenure of Jagoba Bapu Bakshi, who was acting as governor on behalf of the Scindias. And here again on the reverse, just below the Regnalier, you find the initial J. So it is kind of indicative of this person. We've talked a lot about Maharashtra and the north, and I could talk in great detail about the south as well. And I call this the golden Ganga of the south, because this is a reference that you find in the Maratha letters. And it's actually a letter of complaint. And it says that, we invest a lot of money in South Indian campaigns, but it is not bringing us a lot of returns. And the Peshwa describes this particular phenomenon of not getting enough income, saying with this kind of metaphor that he uses is the golden Ganges from the south. By the time it reaches Pune, it drains quite a lot en route, as it were. So they sort of referring to people who sort of pocket the tribute that should come to Pune in between. So of course, there are examples of gold coins that were struck by the Marathas, mainly in the south. Again, the first example is Dharwad. Here again, it's quite interesting that the attribution of this particular variety of pagodas to Dharwad is only on the basis of the typology. So on the reverse, the inscription that you see is in Nagri, but that Nagri sort of matches with the style of that inscription matches with a lot of copper coins, of Maratha copper coins of that period. So I tend to assume that this particular variety of the pagodas was struck in Dharwad, and there is archival substantiation for it. So this variety was called the Ikkeri or Bedanur pagodas. And the charter given to Pandurang Murar, whose name we saw in the previous slide, to run a mint at Dharwad, says mint coins like the Ikkeri pagodas. So this is a clear indication that is possibly that this variety was struck in Narwar. In the east, there was another political character, family, that was the Bhoslas of Nagpur, who had their own kingdom in central Maharashtra and eastern Maharashtra. And from there, they launched themselves into campaigns in Bengal and Orissa. So you can see the expanse of Maratha Confederacy. It goes down from Tamil Nadu all the way to Peshawar and Attock in the north, but also in the east towards Bengal and Orissa. And these are some examples of the coins of the Bhosla Rajas of Nagpur, struck in different mints. Chanda or Chandrapur, which is in very eastern part of Maharashtra today. Nagpur is a secondary capital of Maharashtra, and again in eastern Maharashtra, and also Jabalpur, which is in central India. In the period of decline, the last few years, what happens is that the political lid that one could place on the proliferation of coins and running mints gets lifted off, because the Peshwa is more or less a vassal of the British. The British are more interested in curtailing his political activities and not so much on his economic activities. So at this time, there is a proliferation of mints, and there are lots of currencies which sort of come out in this time. And one particular example is of this typical Maratha coin, which was called Ankushi rupee, that struck in Pune. And here you have examples because struck at Fulgaon, Vai, and also in the princely state of Janjira. These are coins, sort of copies of coins that were struck officially, but still copies of coins of Pune. That was so. You have plenty of varieties of these Ankushi rupees suddenly appearing at this time, and each of them have a different silver content. And in general, the political situation means that the economic situation is in a kind of disarray at this time. But also, quite interestingly, there is enough evidence available to suggest that this proliferation had a positive side as well, and that it indicates that this economy was quite well monetized. People wanted these coins. Therefore, people wanted to conduct their business in the use of coins rather than anything else. So that's a positive side of it. And when this is what precisely happens when the rule of the Peshwas is finally brought to an end by the British in 1818, then they try to consolidate this currency situation, and they try to sort of see what can be done to streamline, to make it more uniform. And as a strategy, they carry on operating some of the Maratha mints. So the impact of the currency was such that the British also had to sort of co-opt into running these mints for a little while. And these mints were then run more or less till 1834-35. And in 1835, when mechanized coinage was launched in Bombay, particularly in Western India, then most of these mints were then shut down. But to indicate that they are British coins, the British then started adding dates to them. And it became a sort of an annual enterprise rather than just not having it. And then one of the reasons for that was because the money changers who were ascribing values to these coins usually ascribed them on the basis of a year that they could see. So having a year which was visible was very important. So in the Pune mint, they carried on striking these Ankushi rupees, but with the addition of dates. And they are, in Marathi chronicles, these coins are referred to as Sanache Ankushi. Sanache means with date in Marathi. So Sanache Ankushi. Similarly, the dates of 1819 or 1821 were added to various mints. Also in Sagar in central India, this is a rare issue where the date 1819 is added. It's again, typologically, they are very much Maratha issues, but the date actually classifies them as British issues rather than Marathas. So this is the legacy that sort of the Maratha coins carry on till about 18, even though the mints were shut till late 1830s, the circulation of these coins carried on for a little longer. So I would imagine these coins must have been in circulation till the mid 1840s, at least, if not more. So a lot of these coins, the impact of the Maratha coinage that had been carrying on since the 18th century lasted in the 19th century as well. So to conclude, what does this tell us? So here are sort of, I enumerate a few characteristics of Maratha coinage. The first important thing is that the Marathas actually, there was an inception of a non-Islamic coinage in the 17th century, particularly under Shivaji Maharaj. But then we saw that the design changes in context with the changing political scenarios. Symbols appear on them, and they have different layers of meaning. They indicate sovereignty, but they also facilitate recognition, and they also kind of communicate identity of the rulers. We saw that there are close connections between mint and revenue administrations, particularly in Malwa. We see this, that the two aspects, the two engines of statecraft are sort of more or less connected here, and you have a lot of information about it from archival sources. In general, there is increased monetization, which is a good sign. People rely. It seems that people were relying more and more on struck coins rather than doing business with any other things. And this, of course, then results in a booming money market, because so many varieties of coins there are, that they have to sort of reckon with. The financial market also sort of goes hand in hand with it. Pune becomes a center of a lot of money activity. In Pune, there are lots of money changers or sahukars or money lenders even, who have enormous species in their capacity, and they make huge loans, particularly to the Maratha Peshwas, to actually facilitate them to carry on these campaigns. But also, this means that towards the end, there is lack of control, and the difficulties in management sort of become apparent. And lastly, from that period onwards, there is this kind of British intervention about streamlining and bringing everything together. And the British, of course, take into cognizance the impact of Maratha currencies and then act accordingly. So that is, again, quite an interesting aspect, and how they sort of execute their policies around it is quite an interesting story. So that is a kind of, an outlay of 150 or 200 years of Maratha activity in here. And lastly, we lost a very major collector of Maratha coins very recently, on 15th of January, Mr. Raghuveer Pai, who passed away. And I would like to dedicate this talk to his memory. He was a very close friend of ours, and a lot of people knew him in Bombay, and he passed away on 15th of January. So I would dedicate the talk to his memory. Thank you.